Hi, guys, and welcome to episode number 163 of the Alcohol Rethink Podcast. Happy Friday to you all. Happy Friday to you all. I hope you're well. Looking forward to this week's episode. I've got a very special guest on. His name is Bash, and he is from a company called ReBourne Recovery, and we're going to find out all about it now during this call. So welcome to the show, Bash.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure, mate. Pleasure. Well, you reached out to me, and there was a particular sentence on your website that really stood out. And I thought, oh, actually, you know what? I think this Bash sounds like we could have a great conversation. And I'll share that just so people who are listening wondering what it is. And it's that life's not about feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling. And it's so true. And I think was a massive part of my own journey in not drinking or giving up drinking, drugs and all of that stuff, was learning how to feel better, right? Because before that I was aware of like a handful of emotions, but then since stopping drinking and everything else, I've been able to kind of increase that platter of emotions, if you like, and become a lot more awareness around how I think and feel. We could dive into that though, but Bash, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks again, Patrick. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, it's a bit real honor. Yeah, because I know it's a very, very well established podcast. I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts. I found them really interesting, quite informative, very creative. I love the content. You know, I love the way you've got a big range of guests that come on board. You know.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, you're now in that mix, and yeah, I think it's really important. Well, as you probably do in what you do, but it's about perspective, isn't it? And it's about just being able to approach things in different angles and ways until such a point that you find the way that resonates or that it really lands with you. I almost talk about it as like a funnel of understanding. It's like we have an awareness of something, we understand it, but then over time and through experience, that funnel goes down deeper and it becomes more just like that knowing and the experience and everything like that. So I think it's really important to be able to just keep finding ways to help people.
Yeah, I think I describe it as a labyrinth where when we're in addiction, you know, I had my 25-year journey and I used to do the same things over and over again. I think Carl Jung said, you know, we don't wake up each morning planning to do the same crazy things over and over again. But I think that's the nature of addiction. You know, it's like that question on Monday morning, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And then we're asking the same question the following Monday. And we genuinely don't know. I think when you're deep in it and you're looking for answers and they're not there, you know, it's quite a misunderstood condition, if you like. You know, some might call it disease. Some people think they're born with it. Some people call it an allergy. So how would you describe it as a condition or a...
Yeah, I do. I think it's interesting, that allergy one, because I heard one of the guys that I work with, he recently had well, not recently, it was a few months ago now, but he had one of those moments where his brain thought it'd be a good idea to go back to drinking, and he soon realized it wasn't. And someone said to him, like, have you ever considered you have an allergy? Now, I think he knows he's not got an allergy, but just even like the idea of there being something outside of his control, like in terms of if you drink this, you're going to have a reaction to it, was helpful for him. So yeah, I don't necessarily believe that addiction is a disease. It definitely causes a lot of dis-ease in our lives for sure, and a lot of challenges. But I think it's something that it's different for everyone, of course. But it's as we grow up and our environment and our family history and trauma, like so many different factors can play into addiction. So I haven't really got a clear-cut answer as to what it is actually.
Okay. I think like with any neurological condition, nobody can actually know because you can't get a microscope and explore each little synapse and each brain cell and as it fires off. So I guess I'd sort of class it all as conjecture, really. You've got your idea, I've got my idea, somebody else has got their idea. But I think the important thing is to have an idea that suits us, you know. So if, for example, I mean, I do use
Sorry,
it's an allergy. The allergy,
Yeah.
sorry. It's the allergy. So I use that allergy analogy quite often because, in effect, you know, I know that if I take out drink, drugs, gambling, whatever, my life becomes inflamed. You know, so if somebody's allergic to nuts or something, eat a nut, their throat gets inflamed and they can't breathe. But for me, my whole life gets inflamed. So it's very easy for me to say, you know, it's an allergy. And I think that if you say to somebody, if you're allergic to strawberries, would you try and find a way to eat a strawberry, or would you avoid them at all costs? If they're a risk to you, not only your life but other people's lives. And I think people can really relate to that, and just to have that understanding, whether it's an allergy or not, is really irrelevant. It's what you believe it is and how it serves you. This belief system, isn't it? Because we're trying to replace old belief systems, aren't we?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, that really resonates with me as well. It's like, why would you take something that you know you're going to have a reaction to and and not in a good way as well? It's funny because just before I stopped drinking, it was around Christmas time, and my partner had bought me these shots of not alcohol, but actually shots to take when you have a hangover. So apparently I'm doing quotation marks here, like full of all like minerals and all this kind of stuff, so that you can avoid the feelings of a hangover and stuff. But which is crazy, really, when you think about it, because you're okay. You might feel a little bit better after drinking by taking some of these things, but you're just masking it. Like you've not got a solution to the challenges and damage that alcohol can or will bring.
Yeah, and in a way, you want to feel that pain. If you want out, you've got to feel that pain on its deepest level. So, like guilt and shame, it's painful, and I say to people that I work with, you could take that two ways. The addicts want to take that guilt and shame, and it want to perpetuate you into the next drinking session. You feel so shit about myself. What can I do to make this go away? Or the guilt and shame. I'm going to drink some more and create more guilt and shame, So the other way you can do it is you use the guilt and shame to lever yourself out of the situation. It's probably the technique that you use, Patrick, is to use that in a positive way. So it's still the same guilt and shame, but you can either go on to the next session with it, or you can go, actually, I don't want to feel this anymore. So let's really go deep into this guilt and shame and remind myself why I'm in this recovery journey.
Or even just recognizing that you are feeling the guilt and shame, right? I think
that's what a gift.
Always the first point. Yeah, right. Just to recognize that and then see how that pattern starts playing out when you feel guilty for drinking and then you start shaming yourself. And I always love that difference that Brené Brown says about the difference between guilt and shame. Like guilt's like I've done something wrong, whereas shame is I am wrong.
Yeah.
And it's the shame that's the killer a lot of the time, right? Because that's when we start to isolate and not want to talk about what's going on because we think we're the problem, really.
Yeah. And it's not, it's our programming. I believe it's not us. I believe it's our programming. It's how, and that really helps people to, when they disassociate from who they are compared to how they were programmed. It's like these two different sort of entities here, so you could actually witness how you're programmed. Yeah, of course I do that because my dad did that or my uncle did that. So that's programming, that's learned behavior. Who's the person that's witnessing this learned behavior play out, and how is this witness going to assist you in making healthier choices? These are great questions to ask within sessions, aren't they? Or even ask yourself. I like to ask that question to myself on my own.
Absolutely. I think that's what I find with coaching is, it's when you're working with someone and they're coaching you, it's great, but you can also go away and use that tool of coaching for yourself as well, whether that's through self-journaling or usually through some kind of self-journaling where you are actually asking yourself questions and not the questions that what's the matter with me? Why do I always do this? Because your brain's always going to find the answers to them and you might not like the answers. Whereas being curious about I wonder why I do this. Like what might have happened in my life in order for me to keep wanting to recreate this for myself. So just that curiosity.
Yeah. So recycling that critical energy into a curious energy is a great technique, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%. All right, cool. So let's just hear a little bit more about your journey. So you said 25 years now, is it, that you've not been drinking?
No, it's 25 years was my addictive cycle. So it's about 11, 12.
Oh, okay.
Maybe 13. That was when I first started doing stupid things like slots and that was my sort of initial journey. And then slots turned to cigarettes turned into drinking sort of turned into drugs as I got into my 16. And then the drugs turned into hard drugs and the gambling got bigger. Everything sort of elevated to the point of I hit this rock bottom at the age of 38. Best thing that happened to me, it was the most painful thing, yet the best thing. But there was this interesting situation that happened. I was basically lying on my brother's floor shivering because he wouldn't put the heating on and whatever. And I was thinking, how did I end up from that, having a lavish lifestyle, kids around me, going around holidays, all that's the beautiful things that society sort of views as a successful person to have. But I wasn't successful inside because I was acting out in an unhealthy way. So something in my head said, look, Bash, you need all the energy that you can get. And it was literally like somebody talking to me next to me, rather than coming out of my own head. You need all the energy you can get. And this drink and drugs is taking your energy away. So you've got to stop doing it. And it's literally like a light went off, all the desire to use just disappeared in an instant. So that sort of carried me forward for a few months. And I was lucky enough to meet somebody in their own recovery journey, and they introduced me to 12 steps. So I did a fair amount of that work, AA. I did some coda work. That was really helpful, because I think most people that have an addiction, myself included, because addiction is really unhealthy relationship with X, Y, and Z. And it primarily, my addiction was with my own thoughts. I didn't know how to what do I do with this thought? The thought is telling me I've been 2 months sober, go out and use, you've got it cracked. What do I do with that thought? I've got to create a healthy relationship with that thought. What's the outcome of this? I was thinking for my frontal orbital cortex in later life. That's what I learned I was doing, which does think do. There's the addict think of the brain. And I learned to move into my neocortex to start think, simulate, and do. So I'm learning this to simulate the outcomes now, or it's a learning curve still. I still have I had a tricky point this weekend. I think I mentioned in a message earlier on that a very close friend passed away this weekend. He was sober for a year. We'd met a year ago. Very, very suddenly, only found out last night, and I'm like, God, what do I do with this? So my brain's running off in all different directions. And in the end, I'm like, let's create some healthy thoughts around this. Yeah, they're the dark thoughts. I want to dive under a rock. But the healthy thing is, I've got a recovery program which allows me to meet these feelings and hold myself in place while I can continue with life. It's still very raw, and I bring that rawness into this interview with you. But the gift I've got today, after 17 years of sobriety, is I can hold that in place and not feel scared, and not feel scared of, bursting into tears. If I do, I do, I just accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that, man. It's just tough, shock, and I appreciate you for being here now and being able to bring what comes with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is it, this is life, isn't it? And, one of the teachings that I've always try and practice is, I think it's a bit of a Buddhist teaching, is they try and encourage you to be willing to embrace the lows as willingly as we embrace the highs, because that's where all the juice is in life. You can have a wonderful week and everything's going fine and there's nothing learned. Whereas if I have a week of ups and downs and lefts and rights and curveballs and shocking news and what have you, I've really delved deep into myself. And I found things that I wouldn't have ordinarily found, because I think it brings up the silt, doesn't it, when shocking things happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can be the hard thing sometimes, is just kind of going with that idea of how is this happening for me versus why is this happening to me, right? A bit like that energy exchange we talked about earlier on.
Yeah. What's the gift in this? These gifts come in really unusual packaging. What juice can I suck out of this painful experience? And these are great questions to ask, aren't they? And I suppose the first thing that happened to me, this morning when I was thinking about this, am I going to be able to just get on with the day and hold this space here with you now, was how would I have been a few years ago? Back in the day, it would have been every opportunity to dive under a rock. I don't know what to do. That would be, and I do know what to do. I've got to hold his memory in place. I've got to hold myself in place and use this pain as an opportunity to do some healing with myself and others.
So why would your brain have offered that you wouldn't have known what to do in the past then?
It's a good question. Because it was just, I had that classic addict, ADHD, OCD, whatever brain you want to label it with, all the different acronyms. And I would just scatter in lots of different directions, So it'd be a bit of this, bit of that. Oh, let's drink, let's take drugs, let's phone people. And I was not present. But what I can do today is I can feel that feeling. And if I feel like I'm going to cry, I'll cry. And if there's people there, there's people there. I don't have any fear. I'm not hiding behind fear anymore. I'm choosing sort of a loving option rather than a fearful option. And sometimes that, and one thing that I try, again, what I try and practice, one of my understandings of human nature, people that panic are the ones that are not willing to face anxiety. So for me, the panic button is picking up a drink or a drug or gambling. That's my panic button. But today I'm willing to face the anxiety of the pain and the disappointment and the grief that comes of living life on life's terms. I wasn't doing it before. I was trying to live life on my terms, and that wasn't helpful. In fact, no, to be more specific, it wasn't my terms. It was my programming's terms. That's how I was programmed from my trauma and my childhood to behave in a certain way, to make certain choices. And they weren't healthy. They weren't serving me. They weren't serving anybody else very well. So I had to dig deep and find alternative ways of being and living.
Yeah, which goes back to that quote I shared from your website, right? Like it's not about feeling better, it's about getting better at feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
beautiful.
It truly is.
Yeah. And so, what might that look like when you think about getting better at feeling? So I know you said it sounds like there's that just one acknowledging, right? Like I'm feeling something, whatever that may be, and then accepting it.
Mhm. I am not it. That's quite a good learning to have. Is I am not angry. I feel angry, but I'm not angry. That's quite nice. And also, when I'm feeling angry, is that the true feeling? Am I actually feeling that? Because they say, like, anger's the bodyguard of sadness, so I'm actually,
Right.
I would question that anger. I'm actually feeling sad beyond this. What is the story? Is it a sad story? Is it an angry story? And when I dig deeper to the story that I'm telling myself that's generating that feeling, it's actually, no, it's actually a sad story. This anger's protecting that sadness. And
Mm.
these are lovely little life skills to have and share and, take through life, I always know when people are getting well. And I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I always know when they're getting well because they're, I say, well, how are you feeling? And the opening question. And it might be, say, 2 months into the program or whatever, or the treatment, and they'll be like, do you know what, Bash? Today might be painful, but I'm willing to face that pain today. So I feel better about that. I feel better about myself to have that willingness to face these difficulties in life rather than run away from them.
Yeah.
And that's music to my ears, that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's funny because I don't know about you, but I work on the internet quite a lot. So I'm on Zoom and stuff. And when I'm asking people that question, I'm not looking for what they're saying. I'm looking at their body and like the reaction that they're having as they're saying it, because that's often far more telling.
Yeah, well, the visual cues are brilliant, aren't they? I love
Yeah.
Zoom. I mean, I do try to as much as possible. You get the odd person, especially in early stages, they want to just get on the phone. I'm like, okay, fine, it's your terms. But then I sort of ideally would get on Zoom so we can get a feel of who we are. And I want them to get a feel of who I am as well. Until you look somebody in the eye, it's hard to know if you can really deal with that person or if we trust that person enough to be vulnerable with them.
Right. And so what now you've kind of gone through your journey and you're here now as part of your recovery plan is helping yourself to feel. So
Yes.
perhaps like give us a little bit more information about why you think the recovery plan is important as part of that
Yeah. I mean,
post addiction, if you like.
to me, it's essential. I mean, that's what my learning curve was. So I had 10 years of sobriety. To continue the story from earlier, 10 years of sobriety, I had a few curveballs, as life happens, and I drank again, albeit for about 5 days, I think. But there
Mm.
was enough in that for me to realize that this is a chronic illness. I get it now. This addiction just doesn't go away. Just because I haven't drunk for 10 years doesn't mean it's not able to sort of represent itself, So my understanding today is new. I don't think there's a cure for addiction. This is my understanding today. It might change. But I do believe you can put your addiction into remission if you make the right healthy choices in life. So it's rather than focus too much on the bad habits of drinking and taking drugs and gambling, let's focus on some good habits. Let's get out, let's get into nature. Let's connect in with some people I haven't connected with as well. Healthy people. Let's find a healthy tribe, people that are sober, people that want a healthy journey. Let's ground, let's meditate on a daily basis, because I think one of the major sort of symptoms of addiction is living in the future. We're creating anxiety by creating these like scary futures, or we're creating guilt and shame by drifting into the past. Like Lao Tzu wisely said 2,000 years ago, he said, people that are anxious live in the future, people that are depressed live in the past, and people that are calm live in the present. So I'll always say the top three things for me, for my recovery, is to meditate, is exercise, and to journal. So and I like sometimes doing voice journaling as well. Sometimes I'll do a 10-minute journal and I'll listen to it on the way to work in the car, and that really deepens my understanding of who I am, rather than how I was programmed. I've got to create that clear definition.
Yeah, nice. I hadn't even thought about that as an idea, doing a voice journal. I record stuff for like podcast ideas, but I hadn't thought about recording just talking about my own thinking.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Especially listening back as well. You kind of like, what did I really say that? but then I think that helps, isn't it? Like gives you that distinction between just all the thoughts that your mind is offering versus like who you consciously want to choose to be in this world.
Yeah, and I think because Freud devised the free association method, didn't he? Where he would sit away from the client and they'd be on the couch and they'd just blurt whatever they say. So it's a bit like free association on steroids. There isn't anybody listening, only the universe, God, however you connect to the whatever else there is. So
Mm.
it's really nice to have that free space and that free association to go blur. This is what's going on for me. And it's surprising how it goes on. Like if you said to me, make a 10-minute journal, I'd be like, God, bloody, that's going to. would blow my brain. But I did one the other day and it felt like a minute or 2 minutes. I had no idea there was so much clutter in my brain that needed sort of defragging, if you like. Back in the day with computers, you had to defrag them to get them to go a little bit faster when they started lagging. That's what it feels like in my brain.
Yeah, definitely. I think we need that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you said three things there, like your kind of core practice of staying calm and being present, right? And when I notice this in myself, I notice it with other guys that I've worked with, is when we aren't feeling our best or things are happening in our lives, like those are the things that tend to go first, right? Like the things that you need the most are the things that you stop using the first. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, stepping away. I think that was your original question was about, the importance of the recovery program. So when I had my 10 years, I looked back and I thought, yeah, I did a bit of 12 steps. I did a bit of this, but it wasn't really structured. It was just me stopping drinking rather than me creating an alternative to drinking, so I just stopped. And that was a massive realization for me. So now I know, well, I'd say 99% of people, if they're going to stop, have something in there to catch you. I've known so many people, myself included, in my 25 years, I stopped so many times, whatever it was, but I'd always start again. And what I would do was I'd start and stay started. I would continue it. Whereas, if what I've noticed especially with people I work with today, if they do act out again after getting into recovery, because there's a difference between abstinence and recovery, is they'll have a one-off session and then they'll go, oh my God, what happened there? And then we'll analyze it. We'll go over what were the thoughts? What did they do? Oh, actually, no, I hadn't been meditating for the last week. I hadn't been doing this. I hadn't seen my friends for ages. And then we can recognize these as hotspots. I've been working too hard. I did 9 shifts back to back. And it gives you the opportunity, so some practices will say that relapse isn't part of recovery. I think relapse is everything to do with recovery, because it shows you it's like a flag. It's showing you where your leaks are, what needs plugging. So I actually rebranded it. I don't like using the word relapse. I prefer to use the word recycling. So it's a lot easier to admit to as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was another thing, actually, I loved about your business as well. Like ReBourne, was it ReBourne Recovery, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously this podcast is the Rethink podcast. And I just find most words beginning with RE are really fascinating because it just means like go again, right? Like, as you said, it's like that recycle. So I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and like reactive, we're reacting again. We're not actually being responsive or responsible. I love splitting that word up.
Yeah,
response able. So we're able to respond now. You and I can make a response to a situation. So this recent bereavement would have sent me into a reaction before, but now I'm able to sort of sit with it, hold it, and respond as appropriately as I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a gift.
Yeah, 100%. And that reaction, right, in terms of how you would have responded, the way I see it, it's almost like that primitive brain, isn't it? It's the survival brain. It's just doing what it thinks it needs to do in order to help you, but just with little misguided or limited knowledge of the outcome.
So it's trying to make, so if I was to reach for a drink or a drug, the actual intention is to ease the pain. So the intention's good, but the practice is poor. It's a poor solution to a genuine problem. It uses a tragic means to solve a genuine problem, and the problem sometimes you just got to sit with it and be with it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the unshaming of it all, if you like, as well, is to recognize that when you are wanting to reach out for a drink or drugs or go gamble, watch porn, whatever it may be, is like what's the
what's the driver?
The driver.
What's the undercurrent?
Or like what's the, I can't think what the word.
What's the unmet need?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what's the unmet
some people,
need? Like, what are you trying to get from it? Intention,
exactly. I'm bored. I need to use. So is that gonna ease the boredom? So 5 lies in, you're feeling not only bored, but you're feeling bored and paranoid.
Yeah.
You didn't sign up for that. You signed up for dealing with the boredom. So is that the only solution? And this is where the sort of like the dialectical behavioral therapy comes in, because you can step back and go, okay, yeah, I could do that. So don't rule that out as an option, but I could also do A, B, and C, and D, and E, and F as well. What's going to serve me better rather than what should I do is a much better question to ask.
Yeah, and that's where you were talking about, you didn't use this language, but this is a language I use. It's kind of like your higher brain, your prefrontal cortex, and then you've got your lower brains, that more primitive brain, which is more emotionally reactive. And when you are able to start using your higher brain to think beyond the here and now, like to think about potential consequences, that idea of play it forward, but then also to start looking at those other options. That's really, really key. And it's almost like you've got to train that part of your brain. First, if you weren't really aware of it.
It's
And
all a
secondly, if you,
practice. The whole
yeah,
recovery
exactly.
process is a practice, isn't it? At any point we can slip over. And once you slip, oh yeah, because I didn't do that. I wasn't practicing that hard enough. I missed that shot or whatever it is, if you want to sort of rephrase it.
And I think that's why some people perhaps do kind of get caught out or let their guard down, if you want to use language like that, is once they stop, they stop the work. And the work doesn't mean they're just thinking about not drinking all of the time, but it could be they let their meditation practice slide, or they stop going out to meet their mates, like any of those examples that you gave. And then all of a sudden it's like in that moment where something happens, and the because there's that expression, high emotion, low intelligence, right? Like when an urge or desire comes in like that, it can feel really strong, right? It can feel like that's when we have that sense of we're not in control or not got power. So yeah, I think
I like to, sorry, Karen.
Yeah, go on.
I like to sort of at the beginning of the nature of the work that I do is to say, look out the window. That's your medicine cabinet. Everything out there is medicine. So standing on the ground in the morning, listening to the birds, that's medicine. They're your meds. It's not, they don't come in a little brown bottle with a bit of cotton wool in the top of it. These are all different. You've got to be creative with what suits you, because what meds suit you don't suit somebody else. And somebody might need to walk for 20 minutes a day. I have to play badminton for 8 or 9 hours a week to get my blood flowing, so that's one of my sort of top meds in the exercise side of things.
Yeah, nice. I think it's really important to have that balance, or be
Balance
conscious
is
of the
key.
balance. Yeah, I was working with someone the other day, and I was saying about how I got Google Calendar to manage my life these days, and everything was blue, right? Like whether it was work, whether it was like playing football, going out with family, everything was just one color.
Yeah.
And then I started, and like one thing I'm really big on, and something that I was taught, is when you are scheduling, calendaring, if that's what you like to do, like always put in your free time first. Like always put in those ways that you're going to meet your needs. And so I do that, but now I've started color coding it so that, if it's family time, it's orange, or if I'm playing football, it's green. So, and then now I get a real sense of what's going on in my week, and I can see like, right, I'm getting this, I'm getting that, I'm not getting enough of this. So like, where can I bring it into my life?
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah. And that's creation, is that you've created like a schedule which sort of colored your life into to a certain respect. And balance is the key, isn't it? As that's all nature wants, isn't it? It wants balance.
Yeah.
We think, in our human thinking, we think, oh no, we need happiness, we need this, but we're craving balance all the time. So when you're flooding your head full of cocaine the night before, your dopamine receptors start closing down the next day. So this is why we feel a bit low, right? Because we've got less dopamine receptors, because the brain's like, oh, we don't need that, man. And we've got all this dopamine coming in, let's just shut a few down. And you're like, oh shit, I need some dopamine now. So it's craving that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, those are the big come downs. That's when I'd end up buying bags and bags full of Haribo the next day, just to try and like get some kind of sense of feeling back in me that wasn't just completely doom.
Yeah, or sweet fizzy drinks.
Yeah, just anything to try and change my state. But again, it's like you're trying to use something to change how you're feeling from something else, and it's not good.
Yeah. Instead of just being with it, what is it, I'm craving for? What's the story that's playing out? But what is the feeling, first of all? In early recovery, like, what you feeling? Oh, I feel like this is this and this. And all of a sudden I start going into this like dialogue. I'm no, that's not a feeling, that's a thought, man. What's the feeling? I'm like, oh, well, then I'll go into some other doc. No. What's the feeling? Oh, I'm feeling afraid. Okay, right, great. We're getting somewhere. I'm feeling afraid. What am I feeling afraid of? I'm not too sure. Well, ask yourself what you're afraid of. Let's dig deep. Where you're feeling this fear? Okay, I'm feeling it in my chest. It's really tight. I don't like it. What's the story behind that? Again, what's the story? What was the story I'm telling myself? I'm telling myself everyone's looking at me. Okay, how true is that story? I don't know. Well, it's not, is it? Nobody's really looking at me. This is what I imagine. Okay, then all of a sudden you've disempowered that story. You've taken the charge out of it. And when you take the charge out of the story, you take the charge out of the feeling. And we can resume life as normal, can't we? And this is where the managing feelings comes in. Yeah, such a gift. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly what the story is behind it until you've questioned it. It's easy just to live in that, God, I feel really scared moment. But until you start questioning it and drilling down, and then you realize it. I was in the dentist chair, a year ago, I think it was, and I was right in the middle of doing some of this, some work, this particular module with somebody. It was all fresh in my head. And I'm in the dentist chair, and I had some trauma as a youngster. I'm not going to go into the details of it, sort of dental trauma. Anyway, I'm in the dental chair, and I've got my headphones on, and I'm doing all the sort of things that I need to do to sort of stop myself from panicking. And I'm literally on like 8.5, 9 anxiety. I can feel it coming up. And as I'm just about to like stop everything, start fling the tools out of his hand and shut the drill and go into panic mode, right? I'm like, hang on a minute, what am I feeling? I'm feeling anxiety. Where am I feeling it? What number is out of 10? It's 8, 9 out of 10. What's the story behind this anxiety? The story I was telling him, I can't do this anymore. Right? That was the story I was telling myself. I'm like, hang on a minute. I've done this loads of times. That's not true, that story. The moment I realized that story wasn't true, my anxiety just disappeared to zero.
Yeah.
And I continued with the work. Phenomenal.
Yeah, I
was
love that.
yeah.
And from that example as well, just like hearing your process of acknowledging that you were feeling something, you go, okay, so what am I feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? How much am I feeling it? And then what's the story behind what I'm feeling? And
Yeah.
that's great, right? It's such a practical thing that you can go away and start using. Anyone here listening now can start just practicing in their own lives.
Don't they teach this in schools? That's my question.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. I to be fair, I think they
Mindfulness.
have
Yeah.
started moving into like personal development stuff. Yeah,
Good.
now, because I know my
Mm,
daughter had those kinds of classes, but I still don't think they go
mm,
into the depths that we're going into.
mm.
But yeah, they are starting to do it, which is good. But yeah, there you go. There's a tool straight away that people can start using, because I think that's what I found is just I didn't understand feelings. I was like, well, yeah, feelings, but I don't understand what it is. Or I think the belief was that I shouldn't be having them
Yeah.
more often than not,
Yeah.
right? And then you kind of like bring in all of that stuff about men and emotions, and there was a lot of belief
Yeah,
getting in
because
the way of even looking at it.
even in our generation, or we're probably a generation apart, you and I'm a bit older than you, but we were still brought up, although it's cool for us to cry in front of each other, right? Or it's okay for us to cry at each other, shall we say? It wasn't okay for our dads to cry in front of theirs, or maybe our granddads wasn't okay to cry and feel feelings. And
Mm.
because there's, I don't know if you're familiar with the intergenerational trauma with the mice. They did the study on the mice. You know that one where they it's about so basically the scientist did seize this great experiment. He got some cherry blossom, and he got these two mice to sniff this cherry blossom, and then he gave them this little electric shock, so they learned to fear cherry blossom basically. So he didn't even have to
Right.
get the tools out, and he just sniffed the cherry. Anyway, stopped doing that. He bred the mice 5 generations deep, so their great grandchildren were with no trauma attached to them. They subjected them to cherry blossom, and they were nervous, so they had
Wow.
no experience of cherry blossom being dangerous, but within their DNA. So this is where when we're doing this work, we're not just doing it for us or the people around us. We're doing it sort of intergenerationally. You look at your great grandchildren are going to be so much different to how they would have been had you not done this work. It just goes on, and the people that they're going to orbit those. This work's phenomenal. We're not just doing it for us. We're doing it for the universe. It's just I can't stop. I get emotional when I think about it. How
Yeah, mate,
powerful this work
I
is.
got all the feels as well, even as you're sharing it, because it is, it's that idea of like breaking chains of addiction almost. It's like it's changing our lives and the people around our lives now, but it's going to have an impact in the future as well, which is massive.
Yeah, and I think that's a discussion we started before about having an illness, disease, an allergy, however you want to frame it,
Mm.
that bleeds on other people or has a negative impact on other people. So it doesn't make it a choice. So I don't have a choice whether I drink or take drugs or not. It's a social responsibility, because I know if I take drugs and drink or gamble, that's going to have a negative impact on the people around me, especially the people that I love. So it's not a choice. It's a social responsibility. Same as if I got the bubonic plague or something, I'm not going to go shopping. I've got to go and keep myself isolated, right? And so it
Yeah.
isn't a choice factor. And I think that's really helpful for people, because it takes the pressure off them when they don't have the choice. Like when I banned myself from the casinos, I took a self-exclusion. There was actually a sense of relief. It wasn't like I was depriving myself. It's like, well, I don't have that option anymore. Right. So I've still got the addict energy to go and do that sort of thing. But because I can't do that, I can reapply, I'll reassign it somewhere else. So I say the opposite of addiction is purpose. So when I got that addict energy, how can I purpose it in a way which is going to serve me well and serve others well? So that not enoughness, that one line isn't enough, 2 lines isn't enough. So how can I be, well, my business isn't enough. How can I get more people on board? How can we sort of expand this and we can get more people working like you and I? So I'm using that same addict energy, but I'm repurposing it. And that's what I encourage other people to do. Use that addict energy on your recovery plan and keep polishing it and changing it and reiterating it and, shuffling it around, moving the goalposts. That works. And don't be afraid of failure either. Go and buy a set of golf clubs. What's the worst case that's going to happen? You can sell them and buy some secondhand ones and get your money back if golf doesn't work for you. Go and learn Spanish. What's it going to cost you? 4 lessons. Okay, it didn't work, but I had a go. Give it a spin.
Yeah,
it's a good way to invest the energy. That's the difference between sort of impulsivity and spontaneity, because we've got that, people with addiction have got that ADHD energy, haven't we? We're like sort of scattered attention. That's like, oh, what a great idea. Let's just do that. And all of a sudden you've got this impulsive, I got married after 11 years, totally impulsive. And that's ridiculous. The spontaneous thing to do is something that serves us well. Like, I'm watching a French film and I'm going to learn French. Brilliant, great idea. So is that a clear definition between I'm trying to transfer that sort of impulsive energy into spontaneous energy, sort of healthy spontaneous energy, because energy is just, it's finite, isn't it? It just goes on forever, but it's not what it is, it's what you do with it, right?
Yeah, so spontaneous for you is doing something with purpose, almost like whereas the impulsiveness is just like
doing something on a whim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
seems like a good idea, probably isn't.
Yeah, you're like, why did I buy that, or why did I do this, or why
exactly.
It's like back to that kind of energy.
yeah, so true.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And yeah, so okay, I had a question about like healthy addiction, but perhaps you've already answered it in what you said. Like I was going to say, is there such a thing as a healthy addiction?
I don't think so. I think if you're going to use the word addiction, because the word addiction to me, I mean, again, everybody's got their own meaning to it, means unhealthy relationship with. Okay, so I don't think you can have a positive addiction, but I do think you can have healthy habits and you can have healthy obsession. So if I get obsessed about being a really good badminton player, rather than just going and playing an hour a week, which a normal person does, with the neurotypical sort of person. For me, I have to take it to the nth degree. So I have to do 8-9 hours a week. I have to do coaching. I have to get the best kit, blah, blah, blah. But this is all money I would have invested in sticking up my nose. So I can write it all off. Even if it puts me in a bit of debt for a while, I don't care, because I know that's good for me. It will come good in the long run. So yeah, in answer to your question,
it's a productive debt as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At least you've actually done something with it. Whereas like being hungover on a come down for 3 days is not productive.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
No. Amazing.
Yeah. So what was your inspiration, Patrick? Can I ask, what was your inspiration to actually stop? What was your catalyst?
My catalyst, I think it's funny because it wasn't a unique one in any way, shape, or form, but it just got to that point where it was so familiar, just waking up hungover, fed up with myself, like trying to buy gear the night before and stuff. Luckily didn't get anything. And then I woke up the next day and I was just like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I doing this? Like, this isn't who I want to be. My son was 1, my daughter was 7 or 8 at the time. And it's like, this isn't how I imagined being a dad, waking up on the sofa hungover. In fact, it's what I'd always told myself that I wasn't going to do, because my dad was a alcoholic or had a drink problem, whatever you want to call it as well. And I could just see that. We talked about patterns earlier on, right? I could just see that pattern starting to play out. And even though I could probably like justify it and say how it was different and stuff, like really at its essence, it wasn't. It was still the same.
Yeah.
And for me, it was that wake up moment. I was like, I can't do this any longer. Like I've had enough.
And they use the term they use in 12 steps is sick and tired of being sick and tired, isn't it?
Yeah. Whether you engage with 12 steps or not, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because I think it's so true.
Yeah, and most people are. There's not many people that I know that drink or do drugs on a regular basis are not sick and tired. But again, they don't have the solution to it. They don't have the answer. And it's not a clear-cut answer, because as you know, you work with X amount of people you've ever worked with. You're never going to work with one person the same as you work with the next and with the next, and it's finding that tailor-made program, isn't it? And helping supporting them to be able to find out what works for them, so what is keeping them sober. It's not about depriving them of something they need. It's a case of I think the first rule of recovery that in some teachings is to create a life outside of drinking or using that is more attractive than the actual using. And it comes in funny shapes and sizes, doesn't it? I mean, one thing I advocate quite a lot is to replace the buzz of addiction with a buzz of mediocrity. So for me, you know, most people, oh, you can play badminton, big deal, you know. But for me, it's like I get a real buzz out of it, you know. So if I made some prunes the other day, I picked some plums off the tree, put them in my dehydrator. I got a buzz out of it every like couple of hours. I'm like turning them all over. Is that one ready? Oh, that one's ready. That's not. Let's change the trays. Let's turn them upside down. Put some apples in there, some bananas. Do you know what I mean? So I'm getting a buzz out of this thing, you know. But and everybody can enjoy that buzz rather than, you know, having a negative impact on myself and others.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
I think that's the bit that takes a little bit of time, isn't it? It's like your brain's kind of regulating itself after years of getting floods of dopamine. You have to kind of
Yeah.
get it ready to have more like trickles, but you do get a lot more excitement out of the more. What was the word you used? You didn't say mundane. You said something similar.
The mediocrity. So, you
Yeah,
know,
mediocrity. Yeah.
replacing the buzz of addiction with the buzz of mediocrity. Some people don't like that word. They're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, well, don't do it then if it don't suit you, you know, but it works for me, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's just that idea of like life isn't supposed to be like up here and then boom down there all the time, right? It's like there's the bit in the middle where it's still ups and downs. They're just not as high and low as when you're using.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's just in peaks and troughs, isn't it? You know, and I think most people that I've, and myself included, have what they call a roller coaster childhood. You know, one minute it's great, things are going okay, and the next minute it's
Yeah.
shit. I just got beaten up by my dad. I don't know why. You know, and I'm still confused now, or I got bullied, or whatever it is, wherever the trauma shows up. And I think that is the baseline of addiction, my understanding. Again, to me, they're all understandings, you know. So I don't quote that this is fact and this is fiction. You know, this is right, this is wrong, this is black and this is white. This is just what my understanding is. Take it, use it. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, replace it with something else. You know, so I'm no guru. I don't sit on some mountain like meditating and think I've got life sorted out, because I haven't. I still have pain, you know, but I just deal with it today in a different way that I would have done like 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Still have
exactly.
anxiety, you know.
Yeah. I got a new book the other week about how the brain works, and on the front of it, it says the human brain contains about 86 billion neurons. And so if we think that we can just kind of like dial down into one specific moment or time in our lives where we decided to become addictive or whatever, like it's just not possible, right? Like this is it's so multifaceted. There's so many different ways to it. But I think the key is recognizing those moments and not becoming too attached to them. But more importantly now, having that awareness of when it shows up and then having the tools to be able to move through it.
And I think the important thing, you know, going on that subject, is nobody chooses to be in addiction. And this is where people go, well, you must do, you know, you're the one that goes to the off license and buy. Who else buys it, you know? And we're sort of in this sort of shame blame game sort of thing. This is why nobody wants to be labeled an addict or an alcoholic and stuff like that. They're not very nice words. But the amount of people I mean, I'll say it to you. You know, if I think I said it to you the other day. You know, if I was to rewind the clock back to the age of 7, and you were sitting with all your 7-year-old classmates, you know, hands up who wants to be in a recovery process when they're 40 because they can't stop drinking. I can't see many hands going up. You know,
They'd be like, "What's a recovery process?"
Yeah, well, it's taking loads of things that are bad for you, that hurt you and hurt other people. Why would I want to do that? You know, well,
Yeah.
you do. You might do. You, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like that's the deceptiveness, isn't it, of addiction sometimes. Like sometimes it can be fun, sometimes it can be good, and then your brain starts that old cognitive bias and
That's
distortion
it.
and stuff. Like we start filtering it and think, oh, maybe it's not that bad. But it's a bit like lying, right? Like when you're young, if you lie and you get away with it, it
Mm.
increases the chance of you doing it in the future, and then you think you're good at it, but it doesn't make it any better.
No.
And you will get found out at some point. But it's funny because with addiction as well, I don't think we said it on this podcast, but I was chatting to you about it, is the idea of like when you are addicted to something, or you find that you just got a really unhealthy relationship or unhelpful, you just finding it hard to stop, is like it's almost like the addiction has its own mind, in the sense that it wants you to believe that you have no control. It wants you to believe that you can't do anything. It wants you to believe that you're the only one, right? Which we
Or
could
you
even look
can,
at as
you
shame.
can. It wants you to believe. The addict wants you to believe you can have the odd drink.
Well, that true too as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to and that was another conversation we had the other day about the, you know, the gateway drug. You know, and most people think, well, it's cigarettes or it's this or it's cannabis or whatever it is. No, the gateway drug, the gateway unhealthy relationship, we say, is the unhealthy relationship with our own thoughts. So if we can sort of, you know, tune into our superpower, which is creation, and create a healthy relationship with those thoughts, they won't drag us down. So when that thought comes in after sort of 2 weeks of sobriety, come on, you've done 2 weeks of sobriety. You've got this. You've nailed this. You're not an addict. You just proved to the world you can stop. Let's have a drink and we'll stop next week again. So where's that voice coming from? Let's analyze that. Is that coming from your higher self that wants health and healing and love and all those light and beautiful things in your life? Or is it your unconscious self where your shadows and your complexes and your low self-worth? Is that, okay, it comes from there clearly, So do you take instruction from there anymore? No, that doesn't serve me well to take instruction. Okay, what does a higher power have to say about this, or your higher self, or however you want to frame it? God self, whatever self it is that serves you the best,
Yeah, exactly. Just a self that serves.
Yeah, but not self-serving too much. Because even the good things, I met a client a few weeks ago, and he had a little blip. It was a one-off event, and I said, we retraced the steps, the last sort of like 2 or 3 weeks, and he says, "Brilliant, I'm going to the gym, but I'm not just going to the gym. I'm going to the gym like 3 hours a day, 7 days a week." And I'm like, "Mate, that's too much. That's like self-serving. You're putting your family on hold while you're going to the gym. There's an imbalance there." And he's like, "Shit, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I've got the imbalance. There's too much." So you can have too much of a good thing, So then you've got to get a balance in place. Okay, let's cut it down to 3 times a week for 2 hours or whatever it is. So yeah, we've got to keep an eye on the ball. You can sort of do too much of the good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this kind of like ties a little bit into that idea of trading addictions, where you move from one thing and you put that energy into something else, which isn't inherently bad, right? But it's just noticing in that example, like 3 hours, 7 days a week. Well, yeah, there's going to be consequences to that, and I guess that's what
Yeah, if
needs
you're
to be
spending
addressed.
£500 a month on golf, and all of a sudden you're eating tins of beans because that's all we can afford to eat, you've got to like reassess your finances and your choices, haven't you?
Yeah,
But I guess
100%.
that keeps it fun as well, because recovery isn't just a one thing. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. With drink and drugs, you're going to do that for the rest of your life. I'm going to take Coke. I'm going to drink. I'm going to take Coke. I'm going to drink that, and that's it. It's a proper like Groundhog Day, isn't it? With the recovery program, like I had a client the other day goes, "Oh, do you know what? I've just booked my first piano lesson. I've always wanted to do it. Now I've got this space to use in a positive way." I'm like, "Fucking brilliant! That's exactly what you need to do. Do more of that. What else can you do? Tune into your creativity side, because the creativity is not just doing the thing; it's creating an interest in something, isn't it?
Yeah,
Watch some Spanish films, for example. You might really enjoy the sound of Spanish to the point you want to learn Spanish. Get creative with it, and it keeps it fun. You've got to keep it interesting, haven't you? Because recovery plans can get a bit stagnant if you're not careful.
yeah, 100%. It's funny you say about watching Spanish films. I watched a Japanese series on Netflix the other day, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And it's like makes me want to go to Japan now. So
Oh wow,
maybe, yeah, I'm gonna put that on my bucket list.
yeah, do it, man. I've heard some good stories of Japan. There's really decent people. It's a whole new world, apparently. My
Yeah,
son's
yeah,
going next April. We've sort of, again, something I never would have been able to do in my drinking days. I wouldn't
amazing.
have had the
I think
spare
that's when they do
funds.
all that cherry blossom stuff. Is it like they've got that
That's it.
one particular place? Yeah, it looks amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I went
Nice.
to Thailand last year. There was this lovely sort of they had this place called, it was in Pattaya of all places. It was called Terminal 21 or Terminus 21 something. Anyway, there's like 7 floors, but each had a different country theme. So you had like Japan on one level, you had England on one level, and America on one. So basically, you go to the Japan level, and you had the
Yeah.
Japanese toilets, so they're brilliant. They blew hot
Oh
air and they
wow.
squirted water at you, and it was all air fresheners and warmed the seats, and yeah, great. So it gave you a little taste of Japan.
Don't go to the English toilets then.
Oh no, definitely not. No, especially if the ones on like train spotting.
Wicked. Ah, Bash, man. No, I've really enjoyed this conversation, mate. Time's absolutely flew by, unfortunately. I'm sure we can pick it up at some other point in the future. But before you go, dude, I'd love to. Well, I always ask a question of my guests, and I'd love to ask that of you right now. And that's, what does it mean to be radically human?
That is a great question. And when you sent it to me, that was the immediate thing. What a great question. And what I did, I thought I'd journal it. So I'm just going to pull up my journal. So I wanted to give you it's a real strong question, actually, because first of all, it's the recognition of being radical. That really clashes, because the baseline of addiction is low self-worth, as you probably know, like trauma, low self-worth, addiction behaviors. And it's like a 4-layer cake. So that was like, hang on a minute, who am I to say I'm radical? That's like it's almost an accolade, isn't it? So my low self-worth is battling with that a bit. And I'm like, actually, do you know what? What is radical? So I looked up the word radical, and it's like, yeah, it's just thinking outside of the box, isn't it? It's making stronger decisions. So let me, what does it feel like to be radically human? Here's my journal. Okay, so primarily it's an honor to have run the gauntlet of alcohol and drug dependency and survived it. and now empowering people to take a similar path out of the darkness that is addiction, but worthy and purposeful, the opposite of low self-worth. I feel lucky because it's challenging yet fun to think radically and find solutions that haven't been or really considered. Also, I'm grateful for the courage to question conventional thinking. This is how we evolve as a species, I guess. It's easy to comply and take the least point of resistance, but more of a challenge to recognize our individuality and beat a unique life path. We leave some of this as our legacy and live beyond our mortal coil. So I hope that answers your question there, Patrick.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. I really appreciate your time and the energy that you've invested into this podcast. And yeah, I just wish it all the best, man. I want it to sort of mushroom cloud and get out there and get viral, you know.
Yeah, nice one. Well, we're
Yeah,
getting there, man. We're definitely getting there. We're getting a lot of
brilliant.
guys listening today, so appreciate all of them and appreciate you for coming on. And if anyone wants to find out about you or your program or any ways to connect with you, where would they need to go or find you?
You could see just Google ReBourne Recovery. Have a look on the website. There's a podcast on the website. Hopefully, I'll add this one on there as well. I've got a couple of BBC radio interviews that I did. There's some reviews on there. Plenty of info, and just contact me through there. Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody, even if it's just for a chat. Just curious. They might be sober curious. I'm always interested to have that conversation. I never get bored of talking about addiction.
No, I mean, not me neither, even. I think it just, if anything, it just gives me more energy, you know, like the more I think about it, the more ideas or more ways I'm trying to think about how I can help people with it. Because as you say, we're all unique. We all have different things that land with us. So let's keep
I
looking
mean,
at how we
and
can do that.
it's the biggest illness, disease, condition, whatever you want to call it. There's more harm caused with addiction than if you added up every single condition, cancer, heart disease, you name it. They don't cause as much harm as addiction because it's so insidious. You know, it's present in so many families, but it's not recognized as present. So it's just accepted and it goes on and it causes harm. You know, so, you know, I'm so grateful and honored that you've taken the time to talk to me, knowing the nature of the work that you do and you support people out of that darkness.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Well, thank you for coming on, man. Thank you for bringing your wisdom and your experience journey and all the tools that you've had to offer as well. I think they're fantastic.
Thank you very much, Patrick. God
Pleasure
bless.
and nice one. And thank you all for listening. Take care and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.